Welcome to the History AI podcast, where the past comes alive, with facts, anecdotes, and a dash of humor. Here are your hosts, Chuck and Marco.
Hey history lovers, welcome back to the History AI podcast. I'm Chuck.
And I'm Marco. Before we dive into today's epic tale, do us a quick favor, hit that subscribe button and leave us a 5-star rating.
It really helps the show grow and gets these incredible stories out to more people. Plus, you'll never miss an episode, whether we're storming castles or exploring ancient trade routes.
Speaking of incredible stories, today we're going back to 10th century England to meet one of the most underrated legends in British history, Æthelflæd, Lady of the Mercians.
That's right, daughter of Alfred the Great, sister of Edward the Elder, and a warrior queen who didn't just hold her own, she made history.
Stick around for fortresses, Viking fights, royal intrigue, because this one's got it all.
Let's rewind the clock to around the year 870. Æthelflæd was born into a turbulent world, a time when Viking raids were tearing through the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. She was the eldest daughter of Alfred the Great, King of Wessex, and his queen, Æthelflæd, herself from a noble Mercian family. This made Æthelflæd not just a royal, but a political bridge between the two most powerful kingdoms in England.
And let's be clear, being born royal didn't mean you were automatically on easy street. Æthelflæd's childhood was probably shaped by war councils, refugee crises, and her father constantly preparing for battle. She grew up during the height of Viking invasions. Wessex was the last major kingdom still standing against the Danelaw, Viking-held territory that had swallowed up Northumbria, East Anglia, and most of Mercia.
Alfred, ever the strategist, knew the future of England depended on unity. So around 886, he arranged Æthelflæd's marriage to Æthelred, Lord of the Mercians. Now Æthelred wasn't a king, but he ruled what was left of Mercia, the kingdom that had once been dominant before the Viking invasions. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a political alliance meant to solidify ties between Wessex and Mercia.
And here's the kicker: Æthelflæd didn't just move to Mercia and vanish into the background. Sources suggest she played an active role in governance almost from the start. Æthelred was significantly older and began suffering from chronic illness by the early 900s. That meant Æthelflæd had to step up, not as a consort, but as a co-ruler. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle doesn't shout it out, but Mercian records make it clear she was the one making decisions, commanding armies, and overseeing law and order.
She wasn't ruling in her husband's name, she was forging her own legacy. And let's not forget, at this point in history, female leadership was extremely rare. Queens might advise behind the scenes, but ruling in their own right was almost unheard of. Æthelflæd was one of the very few women in early medieval Europe to wield real political and military power.
And yet she did it with almost no drama. No coups, no palace scandals, no wars of succession. Her leadership was so effective that when Æthelred died in 911, the Mercians didn't look to Wessex for a replacement. They looked to her. She became Lady of the Mercians, effectively a queen in all but title. The only woman to ever rule an Anglo-Saxon kingdom on her own.
This moment, her rise to sole leadership, marked a turning point in English history. It set the stage for the unification of England under one crown. Æthelflæd wasn't just keeping Mercia afloat, she was preparing it to be a cornerstone of a new, unified kingdom.
And she was just getting started. Now that Æthelflæd was firmly in charge of Mercia, she didn't waste any time. One of her most brilliant strategies was expanding and fortifying a network of burhs, that's the Old English term for fortified towns.
And this wasn't some vanity project. These burhs were a critical part of Alfred the Great's defense strategy in Wessex, and Æthelflæd took that blueprint and leveled it up. They weren't just military outposts, they were the backbone of Anglo-Saxon resistance against the Vikings.
Let's talk logistics. These burhs were strategically placed to be within a day's march of each other, meaning troops could be quickly dispatched to defend any attack point. But they weren't just defensive. They doubled as administrative centers and trade hubs. Each had a defined hides count, a measurement of land and population used to determine the size of the garrison needed.
Under Æthelflæd's rule, we see a remarkable burst of urban development. She either built or fortified towns like Tamworth, which became her royal center, Stafford, Bridgenorth, Warwick, Runcorn, and Chester. Each one was a calculated move to both shield Mercia from Viking incursions and tighten her grip over contested territories.
And here's the kicker, many of these burhs weren't just defensive sites, they were staging grounds for offensive campaigns. Æthelflæd used them to launch strikes deep into Viking-controlled regions. In 917, she orchestrated the capture of Derby, one of the 5 boroughs of the Danelaw.
That was a huge win. Derby had been under Viking control for decades. By taking it, she not only struck a blow to Norse power but also sent a clear message: Mercia wasn't playing defense anymore. It was on the move.
And the cost was high. Sources say the Mercians lost 4 of Æthelflæd's thegns, which were her top military commanders. But it was worth it. Derby was the first of the 5 boroughs to fall, and it cracked the foundation of Viking control in the Midlands.
Her campaign didn't stop there. In the same year, she took Leicester, without a fight. The city surrendered to her, recognizing her authority. That's not just military might, that's diplomatic skill and reputation.
And there's something else. Æthelflæd wasn't just reacting to Viking attacks. She was strategically reclaiming territory, often in sync with her brother Edward the Elder in Wessex. They coordinated efforts, like a tag team, to steadily reclaim England piece by piece. While Edward took territory in the southeast, Æthelflæd moved up through the Midlands and into Viking heartlands.
In essence, she was laying the groundwork for what would eventually become a unified English kingdom. And she was doing it with walls, weapons, and willpower.
It's remarkable. In just a few short years, Æthelflæd transformed Mercia from a weakened buffer state into a revitalized powerhouse. Her burh-building program and Viking campaigns weren't just effective, they were visionary.
And it's not just that she built walls. She built confidence, stability, and a future. We've talked about Æthelflæd the strategist and builder, but now let's meet Æthelflæd the warrior. This wasn't a queen who ruled from behind a desk. She was a battlefield commander, a tactician, and quite possibly one of the fiercest leaders of her time.
And while the chronicles don't give us vivid battlefield accounts, so no Game of Thrones style play-by-plays, we can piece together from various sources just how active she was in military affairs. She personally led campaigns. Not symbolically but actually leading forces into enemy territory.
One of the clearest examples of this is her 917 campaign, where she took Derby from the Vikings. That was no small feat. Derby was one of the so-called 5 boroughs of the Danelaw, major fortified Viking strongholds. Taking one of them wasn't just a military victory, it was a psychological earthquake.
And she didn't win it with brute force alone. Æthelflæd was known for her use of surprise tactics. She was adept at using terrain, timing, and feigned retreats to her advantage. Some sources, though later and possibly exaggerated, speak of her drawing Viking forces into ambushes inside fortified cities.
There's even one legendary account that suggests she used beehives as weapons. Now, let's be clear, this may be apocryphal or folkloric. But imagine it, Viking raiders scaling the walls only to be bombarded by clay pots filled with furious bees. It's like ancient biological warfare.
Whether or not the bee story is true, it captures something essential about her. She was unpredictable, unorthodox, and unafraid to innovate. She turned fortresses into traps. Cities became weapons. Her military mind was, in a word, sharp.
And she had to be. Remember, she was facing not just any Vikings, but the well-entrenched Danish settlers of the Danelaw. These were not disorganized raiders, they were established, fortified communities. Beating them required more than bravery, it demanded patience, planning, and precise execution.
And what's even more impressive? She did all this in a culture that did not expect women to lead armies. Anglo-Saxon society was deeply patriarchal. Yet she commanded loyalty not just from her troops, but from nobles, advisors, and towns across Mercia.
Irish chroniclers were so impressed they referred to her as Famosissima Regina Saxonum, the most famous Saxon queen. They were outside the Anglo-Saxon political world and had no stake in exaggerating her importance. That's real, earned respect.
And even her enemies took note. When the Norsemen of York were in trouble in 918, they reached out to Æthelflæd, not her brother Edward, for aid or negotiation. That's astounding. A Viking city saw her as the more stable, powerful figure to deal with.
Let's put that into perspective. Æthelflæd was the only Anglo-Saxon ruler the Danes of York ever considered allying with. That's not just about military success, that's about political weight. She was seen as a legitimate power in her own right, even beyond her borders.
So while we don't have statues of her on horseback or poems celebrating her blade, her legacy as a warrior is carved into the map of England itself. Every territory reclaimed, every burh established, every Viking driven out, that's Æthelflæd's battlefield resume.
And it's no exaggeration to say that she helped save England. Her efforts, in tandem with Edward's, dismantled the Danelaw brick by brick. Without her, the story of English unification might have looked very different.
Æthelflæd wasn't just a warrior, she was also a skilled diplomat and a master of political symbolism. She understood that true power wasn't held just by swords and soldiers, it was cemented by faith, alliances, and public perception.
Let's start with her use of religion. Æthelflæd recognized early on that faith was a unifying force across Mercia. Religious piety wasn't just personal, it was political. She founded or restored several key religious centers, with her most famous work being at Gloucester and Chester.
At Gloucester, she founded an abbey and even ensured it would become her final resting place, alongside her husband Æthelred. That wasn't just sentiment. By creating a dynastic burial site, she was reinforcing her family's legitimate rule over Mercia, tying spiritual reverence to her political legacy.
And then there's Chester, a once crumbling Roman city that she revitalized. She didn't just restore its walls, she made it a key part of her military and religious network. She also transferred the relics of St. Wubbock, a revered Mercian saint, to Chester, turning it into a pilgrimage site and religious power center.
And speaking of relics, this part is huge. She orchestrated the translation of St. Oswald's bones to Gloucester. Oswald was a 7th century Northumbrian king and Christian martyr, and his remains carried enormous spiritual significance. By bringing his relics to her domain, Æthelflæd was doing two things: increasing the sacred prestige of Gloucester and aligning herself with the sanctity and legacy of heroic Christian kingship.
That's like someone today moving the remains of a national hero to their capital. It sends a clear message: this is where power, holiness, and destiny now reside.
And it wasn't just about relics. Æthelflæd issued charters in her own name, which was unusual for a woman in that era. She wasn't just operating as a placeholder for Edward or continuing her husband's policies, she was enacting her own.
She even minted coins bearing her name. That's a huge statement of sovereignty. In the medieval world, coins were the Twitter of the day, symbols that circulated daily and told everyone who was in charge. When your name is on the money, you're not just in the game, you're calling the plays.
On the diplomatic front, she also maintained peace and alliances in a fractious world. She avoided unnecessary wars with Wales and handled border issues with skill. While we don't have records of every meeting or negotiation, the stability she maintained in Mercia, especially during Edward's more aggressive campaigns in the south, speaks volumes.
And even more impressively, she did all this without direct conflict with Edward. There's no sign of sibling rivalry or power struggle. She kept Mercia independent in practice, even if Edward was technically overlord. That kind of balance required real diplomatic finesse.
And this was no small feat. Remember, Mercia and Wessex had once been rival kingdoms. Alfred and Æthelred's alliance was delicate. That Æthelflæd could not only preserve but enhance Mercian autonomy without undermining the greater goal of a united England is nothing short of genius.
But that June, after years of tireless campaigning and statecraft, Æthelflæd died at Tamworth, her favored royal residence and one of Mercia's most important political centers. Her death marked the end of an extraordinary chapter in Anglo-Saxon history.
By the year 918, Æthelflæd was at the height of her power. She had taken back significant territory from the Danes, revitalized Mercian identity, and set up a network of fortified towns and religious centers. She was a queen in all but name, and one of the most powerful rulers in Britain. And to this day, she remains one of the few women in early medieval Europe to have ruled in her own right, commanding armies, shaping policies, and securing her people's future.
Her legacy didn't just live on in buildings or relics, it lived on in the idea of who could lead, and how. She showed that kingship, rulership, wasn't about gender. It was about results, reputation, and the ability to unify people under a common vision.
She was buried in Gloucester, at the abbey she had helped found and where her husband Æthelred had been interred 9 years earlier. That alone tells you a lot. This wasn't just a burial. It was a symbolic statement. Gloucester was the spiritual heart of her reign, and the foundation of her dynasty's legitimacy.
But the real drama came immediately after her death. Despite centuries of male-dominated rule, the people of Mercia didn't turn to Edward, her brother and King of Wessex. They turned to her daughter, Æthelflæd. She was installed, briefly, as ruler, suggesting the Mercians wanted to continue Æthelflæd's independent line.
Now let's pause here. Æthelflæd's succession is one of those remarkable what-ifs in history. Had she ruled longer, could Mercia have remained semi-independent? Could England have become a true dual monarchy? The fact that Æthelflæd was even accepted, even temporarily, is a testament to her mother's lasting influence.
But Edward wasn't having it. Just a few months after Æthelflæd's death, he moved quickly, marching into Mercia, deposing Æthelflæd, and absorbing the kingdom directly into Wessex. From that moment forward, Mercia ceased to exist as an autonomous political entity. It was now part of the emerging Kingdom of England.
It was, in a sense, the fulfillment of Alfred the Great's dream, an England united under one crown. But it came at the cost of Mercian independence, and arguably, the end of a uniquely progressive experiment in female rule.
And yet, without Æthelflæd that unification might never have happened. Her campaigns broke the Viking hold over the Midlands. Her diplomacy ensured that Mercia didn't fracture or resist unification. She handed Edward a kingdom on solid footing, economically stable, militarily strong, and spiritually renewed.
So while she may not have lived to see a fully united England, she played a pivotal role in making it possible. Her life was a bridge between the chaos of the Viking Age and the dawn of a new political order, one where the idea of a single English kingdom could actually take root.
Historians have debated whether Edward erased her memory from the official records. The West Saxon chronicles, for instance, downplay her role significantly. But Mercian records and later chroniclers like William of Malmesbury make it clear Æthelflæd was revered.
And in modern times, her reputation is undergoing a serious revival. Scholars like Tom Holland have called her the founding mother of England. Statues have gone up, books have been written, and TV shows like The Last Kingdom have finally started putting her back in the spotlight.
Her death might have marked the end of an era for Mercia, but it also laid the foundation for England's future. Æthelflæd wasn't just a transitional figure. She was a visionary leader who helped forge a new national identity, through strength, strategy, and sheer brilliance. Æthelflæd's story defies stereotypes. A female ruler commanding armies while building cities and shaping national identity, powerful even today.
Despite being overlooked in West Saxon chronicles probably because Edward didn't want Mercian separatism, historians have rediscovered her legacy thanks to Mercian registers and banners of chroniclers like William of Malmesbury.
Tom Holland argues she was unfairly forgotten, like the founding mother of England, and needs her rightful place in history.
Æthelflæd's life shows how one person, especially a woman, in medieval times could reshape a nation.
Huge thanks for tuning in. We hope you loved learning about the warrior queen of Mercia.
If you did, please rate us 5 stars, subscribe, and share with fellow history buffs. It helps the podcast grow.
Don't forget, we're evergreen. Check out any of our past episodes anytime.
And we want your input. Suggest future topics via Facebook or Instagram, links in the show notes.
Also, visit our merch store, t-shirts, mugs, and more.
From Chuck and Marco, thanks for listening to the History AI podcast. Catch you next time.
Keep exploring the past.
Born in the shadow of Alfred's flame, a daughter of kings, but not just in name. With sword and scroll she learned the land, and took her fate in her own hand. A bride of alliance, not of chains, but in her heart the lion reigns. When sickness took her lord to sleep, she rose to guard the realm he'd keep. Æthelflæd, lady of the shield and crown, you held the line, you held it down. In the forge of war your legend burned, a queen indeed, if not in word. Æthelflæd, they feared your name across the day. Your courage roared through Mercian rain. common folk. From Gloucester down to Chester's gate, you carved the shape of England's fate. No throne bestowed, no jeweled ring, but still they called you warrior king. The Northmen fled your battle cry, and in their saga still you ride. Æthelflæd, lady of the storm and flame, you fought for more than just a name. With every stone and every sword, you stitched the land to one accord. Æthelflæd, the Danes may sail, the kings may fall, but you still walk the Mercian halls. In whispered winds and churchyard stones, you reign though now alone. You gave your blood, you gave your breath, you earned your peace, you earned your death, but no dark grave could seal away the dawn you lit that guides our day. Æthelflæd, no crown could match the weight you bore, no bard can count the foes you wore, but here we stand because you stayed, because you bled, because you prayed. Æthelflæd, though time forgets the lines you drew, the land remembers, it remembers you.